Welcome to this Using Your podcast. My name is Marlon, and in this sound capsule will store participants in news in the UK to explore the stories and give it their opinion. There are news sites out there for disabled news, but disabled people news affects our lives, it's still underreported, and generally, as many of us already know, we are underrepresented in the media, so the aim of this podcast is therefore to try and address the balance. So for our stories from the BBC, and it's MPs Nari Paku legalising assisted dying in England weighs by 23 votes. MPs voted about the bill legalising assisted dying in England and Wales by 23 votes. The bill sponsor, Kim Leadbeater, said she's well over the moon as the bill will now give terminally ill patients a choice and dignity where they might have otherwise had it. Opponents of the bill expressed dismay over it clearing the Commons with the Not Dead Yet UK campaign describing the vote as a setback but not the end. But the journey of the bill isn't over yet. It will narrate to the House of Commons where peers are expected to debate it further. So we'll just give a bit of opinion there. It's great over in the news. This is a news tab we've been dreading. But in the end, as already been stated, it's not ratified. The bill's been ratified, so it's going to go through the House of Lords, and I think there'll be a lot of back and forth, and there'll be a lot of amendments to be made when any bill that finally comes out. But I still think, however, we will see a assisted dying bill of some shape before in the coming year or years. If I'm being honest, I think this has been a long time coming. I know that I'm personally moved about it as a person for the and for the disabled community. I do understand the other side. But going for people who feel they need the right to dignify death, to feel that there's a lot of disabled people to and they find themselves adversely affected by such legislation. And I think in terms of dignified death, I think that any people want me that they'll get no such thing. At least not to say people don't have strong advocacy to speak for themselves or don't have a voice, and or social standing in economic means to speak up for themselves. I say social standing in economic means because there are plenty of disabled people with the knowledge and articulation to advocate for themselves, but still don't get listened to in serious. If it's us to the people worried about dignity in dying, not disabled people still fighting for dignity in living. I mean, can't even a lot of people with accessible transport. I mean, talk about the House of Lords. There's a peer in the House of Lords, though. I think it was last year. Disabled peer, Tony Gray. Was he last year? I think it was. His reports that she had to call off a train because the inaccessibility that was only assistance to support to get off the trains. Give so creative being a bit apprehensive, but we still struggling with accessible transport in 2025. I mean, they talk about safeguarding to ensure that people are protected, but I think it's a massive task. I think the mental capacity just got to be almost redefined, but there's a court protection, etc., and so forth. Well, there will need to be a whole entire kind of arm of it that looks at assisted dying and the tastes, etc., and so forth. And I don't just think it's a capacity that people make decisions. I think the whole holistic environment and people around the individuals need to be looked at, and relations and financial aspects, just like all the stuff about fears of coercion stuff. You need to be real facts around in terms of the context of how the person got to that decision, who's around them, who's influencing the decision, etc. and so forth. I think there's real whole holistic assessment needs to be made over a period of time to make sure it's safe. I think it's easy process to try and navigate and create, I think. I don't know what safeguardings are about Dignitas and what they require in terms of someone making the decision and for them to go ahead and support them. But I guess it's going to be very, very, very big rigorous. It needs to be. The Valve rugby and NHS, I think they'll need their own new service in terms of dealing with this. Supporting this because I don't think you can just leave it to as it is and leaving it to GPs or consultants, etc. I think it's, obviously we all know NHS is overwhelmed as it is, but I think this isn't being introduced. I think it's going to be a whole new set of funding needed for the legal infrastructure, but also to facilitate the process as well, and the relevant professionals involved. And whatever the new legislation and service and how it's delivered when it comes through, and whatever safeguarding is in place, politics and social climate will forever muddy the waters. And a climate where the media and political messaging is that there's no money, there's lack of housing, lack of public funding, lack of NHS beds, doctors, nurses, and there's waiting lists for those suffering incurable illnesses. We lack affluent status purpose who rely on the public purse, as it were, for benefits or accessible housing or social care and their own home or care or nursing home. I could understand the fear for psychological shift in mindset from wanting to live to feeling like a burden, especially if society's been telling you your whole life that's the way it is, especially for many people long-term disabled. I think I don't know how you police that. Often it's everyone's story, but a lot of the frontline campaigners representing media influence dying and again, not anything against them because that's what they believe. They should have the right and respect the right from their perspective. But a lot of them have got incurable illnesses or terminal illnesses or progressive illnesses or cancer but later in life. What I worry about is, say for instance, someone with a life-limiting condition who's born with a life-limiting condition and they lived in the climate, as I said, with benefit codes, with social care codes, etc., lack of accessible housing, all the lack I just described. It's a psychological shift for a lot of those individuals and whether they will be I don't know how access to dying and environment around them and who the influence of how if when that legislation comes through, if almost probably will have influences the rest of society's attitude towards disabled people with lifelong progressive illnesses. That's what worries me. And whether there's a soft coercion that then comes into rhetoric, etc. and so. And I don't think all the safeguardings in the world can place that kind of influence. It does come about. Even outside of this, I think back to cases of able-bodied people who become newly disabled. The mobility, feel like their life is over. I mean, where the safeguard's going to be for these devastated individuals who may very well feel with the lowest step for a caregiver whole. After all, remembering as for a young person who's paralysed and driven to Dignus has and supported to end their life, treasure of that place will never leave me. I think it was a young cat who was paralysed up to an accident in Rugby. And I always felt that, yes, their dignity in death, but I felt as though felt like they were never shown or given the tools, time, and support to attempt dignity in their new life circumstances. And to me, that will always be the last of this debate. and the cost of dirty many people combining for legislation allocated target added to death but many disabled people as to for deferred life. And in the kind of year more codes than has already said, and where in the last 14 years at least you've seen all the freedoms disabled people for the previous of the last 30 years in terms of gear acts and the DDA and more access to education, housing, accessible housing, employment opportunities, etc. and so forth. All those seem to be slowly being stripped away from the last 14 years over the codes that have happened, the coalition, etc. and so forth, and the Tories, and then again now this to the codes. Always a bit of a thought to it. Guess we just need to keep speaking out, and it does have an effect, because it was only a few weeks ago that 100 prominent disabled people wrote that open letter to Keir Starmer that was highlighted about in The Guardian, and has had an effect, because since then you've had, no MPs were against the cuts and were always willing to rebel, but the groundswell of kind of them speaking out seems to have increased since that letter came out, and also that in itself a demonstration of the fact that there's 100 people I'm not no friends leftist, but the fact that they're prominent people that have been able to achieve public life, not that that's the marker of any disabled life. It's life itself, living life itself, but the fact that they are prominent people shows what people, if they choose to wish to and are given the right support, can achieve, and the flies in the face of cutting all that infrastructure away. They sure did not been cut to a significant degree, but even further. That kind of flies in the face for that. But hopefully, companies keep speaking out, will at the very least seek crucial safeguards put in place for this act, so that if it does come into force, what many disabled people feel to be the future won't be a legislation that affects them in a overtly negative way. Second story is from the Spitting News Service, and its ministers are secretly considering means testing PIP. DWP meets despite pledging Green Paper. Labour ministers are considering whether to start means testing personal independence payment, which is likely to cut billions of pounds a year from benefits spent in the information secure from entitlement work at veterans as revealed. The highly controversial idea would mean payments contributing to extra disability costs in future only come to those less than a certain level of income, savings and investment. Comes as the government's new universal credit and personal independence payment bill, which aims to restrict and attributed to personal independence payments. People who got a disability element of universal credit received its first reading in the current. That bill does not include any measures to means test PIP, and the Pathways to Work Green Paper published in March insists that PIP will remain an important non-means tested benefit for disabled people and people with long-term health conditions. Behind the pledge, ministers, special advisors and civil servants are discussing whether PIP should soon be merged with the universal credit. The information came in response to a Freedom of Information request from welfare rights expert Fink, who had asked the DWP for copies of reports produced since Labour came to power last July that discussed the potential possibility of making PIP a means tested benefit. You noticed that various members of Labour cabinet, including Works and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall, had repeatedly linked PIP to work, even though it is available for disabled people both in and out of employment. When DWP responded to his request, he admitted that he held the information relevant to his request to be refused to release documents taking advantage of the Freedom of Information Act exemption that protects the private space within which ministers and their policy advisors can develop policies without risk of premature disclosure. It admitted there was legitimate public interest in understanding the rationale behind proposed changes to disability benefits, including whether and how the department has considered the option of means testing PIP. It then added, Information requested includes any stage analysis and internal advice as directly informing the policy development, releasing the material prematurely to this distorting public understanding of the policy direction, especially where proposals are steady evolving and subject to change, could also lead to undue pressure on decision makers or misinterpretation of ideas that have not yet been fully, but not yet be finalised or endorsed. Response to that. And obviously we don't have full clarity on this, but I'm surprised that this is something they'll be considering, if indeed they actually are. So benefits got Saga. To me anyway, first got right to the bottom. And eventually we'll get there. As I said previous story, indeed the last episode, it's hard not to be cynical. I think there's a agenda against disabled people because we're being politically gaslit. Do more with less, or increasingly do more things. It's disabled people. As a disabled person, sorry. It baffles me how this really benefits at this up. It's such a maze. I'm a cynical person, but just because my life experiences have led me to be so, and benefits is big business. It doesn't seem to be. Because of claimants, really, but these big business providers, etc., and so forth, for instance, look got millions in contracts for disabled testers. And always baffles me that people with lifelong conditions still have to go for tests every 3 years or whatever it is. So, key impairments that aren't really going to fluctuate. There's not going to be that much change, or it's not going to improve to a different degree. And in terms of just people, sad people, as opposed to the benefits of that, it baffles me the amount of money they spent on the testing a condition that isn't going to change. Is that about fair system, or is that about providing contracts to providers? And also they talk about the cost of the work for a bill. I always think ways to end up thinking you commission services with nurses or doctors to test individuals that they say once or one-off basis every few years, ready for a short amount of time. Whether expert that might be can't possibly grasp the nuance into a complex medical condition or impairment by meeting someone for the first time, or half an hour or whatever it is. All you have to do is look at the individual's NHS records to make an assessment of what the condition is. I guess there's some medical conditions do need testing. They fluctuate ones, and so for instance, I'm talking about not long lifelong impairments, for instance. I don't understand the testing around that. It's been a long time since I've been to any of the face-to-face assessments, but even they don't make much sense to me in terms of the physical tests that's to do and stuff, in terms of do a bit of stretching, or I get the ask you to walk with an aid, etc. and so forth, but say for instance came out to well, there's nothing that it's done the tests unless I've changed them that relate to be any of the tests doing a day-to-day job. It's all about asking to sort mail or put items up going on, or make a bed or cup of tea, or any of those tests that would make some kind of sense, but get there's got to be some kind of assessment about things just seems expensive. Story number 3. In BBC, patients for psychiatry unit given 2 billion damages. Trigger warning, there's mention of abuse. It's from more than 50 fallen patients between psychiatry unit have each been awarded a 5-figure sum in damages totaling more than 2.5 billion. Settlement is for patients who and adolescent unit in St Albans, Hertfordshire, who was subjected to alleged sexual abuse or mistreatment during late 1960s to the early 1990s. Stanbury, 59, who was admitted twice at the age of 13 said the violence was for the sake of it. Hartford Uni, NHS Foundation Trust, which now provides mental health services in the county, said it was deeply sorry for those people who had been such a traumatic and unacceptable experience. Spokesman for the Department for Health and Social Care said apologies have been issued for the events at Hill End, and will do everything in our power to make sure other families do not suffer such an appalling breach of trust in the future. Individual just mentioned said he spent almost 300 days at Hill End after being admitted twice from May 1979 to September 1979 and from March to September 1980. Described his time there as like some sort of experiment you called staff members using physical violence if they felt children were not being compliant. The claimants have been settled under a compensation scheme launched in July last year by law firm Relay Day on behalf of about 19 former patients. Obviously, sympathies correct victims that were in this institution and at least have some sort of recompense for their ordeal. But the money won't have compensated for having experienced such horrific abuse, but as always, it's always a sentiment to hope lessons will truly be learned. I hope they will be learned this time out. And then our story is again from BBC Online. Chronic fatigue is not in your head, it's in your blood, so he explains. People with ME or chronic fatigue syndrome have major differences in their blood compared with healthy individuals, experts suggest. Universities and researchers said their findings could pave the way for a game-changer diagnostic test. Professor Chris Ponting said for so long people with ME, CFS have been told it's all in their head. It's not. It's seat in their blood. However, some critics of the studies and researchers have overstated the significance of their work. The study used data from the UK Biobank health database of over 500,000 people to compare 1,455 ME CFS patients with 131,000 healthy individuals. The research showed the results were mostly unaffected by DPT levels. The university team said before the open consistency of the blood difference would support a long-term goal of developing domestic blood test. Surgeon Dr. Sigurd Binges, I was part of it's SJOERDBENGES. Sorry, I meant that. Sigurd Binges told BBC Radio's Clipon in Scotland. One thing our evidence points to is that ME is very much conditioned in the blood. Perhaps previously held perceptions are not quite the case. It is really not due to inactivity, and we hope that this helps with problems where individuals it is believed about the symptom. The individual researchers examined more than 3,000 blood-based biomarkers and accounted for differences in age, sex, sensitivity levels. The results were replicated afterwards using data US. Professor Chris Ponting of the University MRC Human Genetics Unit said, for so long people, ME, CFC have been told it's on the head, it's not to see people's blood, so the evidence should display any lingering perception that ME, CFC is caused by deconditioning and exercise tolerance. However, some experts of which study, Alan Carson, professor of the neuropsychiatry at the University of Edinburgh, said the researchers overestimated the significance of their work. Professor Carson said, if the one was to ask, is MECFS a figment of the imagination? But this study showed it's not. However, to claim blood biomarker differences prove that condition is not all in your head. First, to appreciate that both physical and mental illness show similar types of results. Kevin Montgomery, Emma's professor of applied statistics at the Open University, said, I think this is a important piece of research, but it's also important to be careful not to gain too much from findings. There's not more to do. I'm not any kind of scientist, so I'm not gonna be in the merits of the research. I'm just gonna take you on first Friday, you're a loud thinker. There's many people that MACF say these research many Betty tells the research Betty tells on what they call the hour. Then all in that, kind of think in terms of the positivity of these research is a step in the hard direction. To try and defeat this thing with this correct. The condition historically. All things have got better. But very recently, yet, the case of right died and the coroner. That's lasted a little while of authority. I think it was down south, and I can't remember the local authority where they. The city was probably going to down to their Friday suit and just spore her with that. Emmy. So, I expect it was trying to years. Those with ME still struggle to get support. Upset with social care. How much we talked about before about the benefits system that's also in OMED to navigate for a lot of people with ME. So it's research like this is a step in the right direction to tackling that stigma and also to kind of towards some kind of cure or it's indication that it's that you can test for it because that gives it legitimacy as well for those who are still debunking that evening season, which is unbelievably 2025, but there's still some that argue that. So hopefully this again is a step in the right direction. So for this episode, thanks for listening. Hope to see you again soon.